Hi, everybody. This is Jacqueline Lukeman.
And way in the back over here, enjoying the nice view outside, is me, Abdul Shahid Lukman.
And this is live in Lukeman Nation. We're coming to you from Washington, D.C. And it has been a tumultuous week. It's been an interesting week. And we're going to continue this conversation that we've been having this few weeks about the lack of desire to focus on racial issues in the progressive movement, not just from the sphere of this one incident that happened that I talked about at length before, but we're going to keep this conversation going and expand it to talk about why we need to keep talking about race in especially in the progressive movement. This can't be something that we're just like, okay, well, we're going to pay attention to this issue when you're upset about this one issue, and now we're going to talk about healthcare, and now we're going to talk about militarized police, and now we're going to talk about all of these other issues, but completely outside of the sphere of race, because those issues, while important all by themselves, they become even more critical issues for people in vulnerable communities like Black people, like Native people. So one of the things that was like a huge deal this week was the healthcare debate, and we all know we all know about the craziness of the GOP healthcare plan, which, if there was any, if there was ever an actual death panel, the GOP proposed healthcare bill is it. According to the statistics that we're all familiar with, 22 million people will be left without health insurance coverage, and that's just in the first year. After like 5 years, then it expands to, like, what was the number, hon? It was like almost
Yeah,
50.
like in the year 2026, like 49 million people
Yeah.
estimated to be without health care.
I mean, and of course, when the GOP first introduced their plan, or the Senate first introduced their answer to the House's disastrous healthcare proposed healthcare plan, I am sure these people sat in that room and said, "Hey, I mean, we're only gonna kill 22 million people. I mean, the ACA was gonna left 28 million people uninsured. So I mean, we're gonna save 6 million lives, but yeah, only 22 million people are gonna die." There's no way these people can have heard the assessment or read the assessment from the CBO and have thought about that any other way to continue to push it, to continue to say, okay, this is a good idea. And of course, they realize what a disaster it is because they've delayed any kind of vote on it until after the July 4th holiday. I think, this is just me, I think this is just their cushion to go back to the back rooms and clean up some of the blood that this bill left on the floor, that belonged to the American people. I don't think they're going to be all that successful. Don't expect the revised GOP healthcare plan to be any better than the monstrosity that they've already introduced. You guys don't expect any improvement. It's not going to be any better. And as a matter of fact, one of the things that they hated so much about the ACA, and you know that you have heard us say that the ACA was inadequate. It's inadequate. It doesn't go far enough. It's better than nothing, but better than nothing can never be a reason to just settle for better than nothing. Now, this whole, good, it can't be the enemy of perfect. I think that's a lousy a way to frame the discussion around health care and the right that every American should have to access to adequate health care in this country. Good enough or better than what we used to have is not good enough. Single payer now. That is the only option anymore. But one of the reasons the GOP hated the ACA so much was because of the penalty that the ACA levied against people who didn't carry insurance. Well, there's a penalty in the GOP healthcare plan against people who don't have insurance. So, I mean, this whole, to me, that's just one example of how hypocritical the GOP obviously are. You're right. That's not a surprise. Nothing they do should be a shock to anyone. I mean, it really shouldn't. As horrible as the some of the things the GOP has introduced in the past few months, especially the past few weeks, have been, none of it should surprise you because we've been seeing vestiges of it building up in the right, in the religious community. We've seen how politically involved conservative Christians have become. So the Supreme Court decision, which I haven't read, so we can't really talk about it yet, because we haven't read it. So we don't know what's in it. We don't know what's not in it. We don't know what it really means, but we will talk about it in the coming week when we do read it. But it shouldn't be a surprise to you that the Supreme Court issues a ruling that seems deferential to churches. That we've been talking about the GOP grooming conservative Christian youth through its private religious higher learning institutions like Liberty University to infiltrate and take over the government. Y'all thought we were kidding. Did you think we were just making stuff up? This is what they've been planning to do for decades. Decades. And they've been doing it all in the open. But we on the progressive side have focused on how much we hate religion that we haven't paid any attention to what these people were actually doing. So none of this should surprise anybody. But I think, Hun, what has been surprising for me, and definitely for you, because you brought it up and it actually slipped my mind. Progressives say that we're all about single payer, and we were all excited when so many people signed on to support Representative John Conyers' H.R. 676, which is Medicare for All bill, in the House. And that's fabulous and wonderful. His bill now has a record number 104 signers in support of his legislation. But what was the thing that you said, Hun, that was surprising that even I forgot?
Well, as far as Bernie Sanders not bringing in a bill.
Yeah, what is that about?
All right. Well, as I pull up this article, now this one was reported by Black Agenda Report. Now, apparently, the Democrats, in their way of trying to reinvent themselves and try to go more towards the left and take on the values of being progressive. Elizabeth Warren has been leading the charge about saying that the Democrats need to get behind single payer, and that's what they need to do. They need to get behind single payer. And so Bernie, on the other hand, who's in the Senate, he hasn't. Bernie, according to the Black Agenda Report, Bernie won't introduce a Senate version of Medicare for All or single payer for all. He won't do that. There was a lot of talk about him back in Conyers' bill, but as we see that's not even the case. Sanders had said that he was going to have something available in April. I think one said that it was in February, and then there's nothing. And so now, after the dust is cleared, we still don't have a commitment on Sanders, who, mind you, now was the one who introduced all of this to the nation through his campaign as president.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to show you the article from what is this? Common Dreams. Let me see if I can pull this article up for you guys. This was back in let's see, what was the date? This was back in April. Remember in March and in April when there was all of this excitement about Representative Conyers' bill 767 and Bernie Sanders supporting it, and all of these people saying, yes, we need to support Medicare for all, and Bernie Sanders, I'm sorry, not 767, 676, HR 676, and Bernie Sanders saying that he was going to introduce this a Senate version of a Medicare for all bill. Well, that hasn't been introduced yet. There has been nothing from Bernie Sanders yet in the Senate. Why are you over there smiling? Are you reading comments from people?
Yes, I am.
What are people saying?
Oh wow! Jesse said, "Oh, you put me back in the corner again." Huh? Yep, that's where I'm at, Jesse. I'm back in the corner.
So, I mean, this whole thing about we need to push for Medicare for all. And listen, I understand that this is the point at which some progressives get all emotional. You know, you can't say anything bad. If you either can't say anything bad about Bernie Sanders, you either can't criticize him at all, or people go all the way left field and say that he's a traitor.
Yeah,
and he's
I mean,
yeah.
You know, he's taking food out of starving kids'
He's
mouths.
stolen people's livestock.
Right.
And, you know, he's blown up bridges.
All kinds of stuff.
I mean, we need to be adults in the room here when we're talking about politics, policy, and politicians. Nobody's perfect. We can't treat politicians like saviors, because they're not. They make mistakes. They fall short. They disappoint us. All of them. They do things we don't like. They do things we don't agree with. And when that happens, we have to be able to say, okay, I can criticize you honestly and objectively on this issue without demonizing the person altogether, unless we are talking about serious, human rights kind of violations. So I understand that for some people, as soon as we criticize Bernie Sanders, some of y'all just clicked it. Nope, I'm not hearing it. I don't want to hear it. But if we are trying to, if some progressives are trying to reform the Democratic Party from the inside. Now, once again, I personally don't believe that's possible, but my belief doesn't translate to what other people believe. If some other people think they can do it, have at it. But you're not going to transform the Democratic Party from the inside if you're not introducing any transformative ideas. And Sanders not introducing a Senate version of Medicare for all right now doesn't seem very transformative to me.
Well, I mean, Chanel commented and said that, it shouldn't be up to him to introduce it. There are 99 other people who can introduce it. And that's true. Christopher said that, he isn't the issue. And no one's trying to make him the issue. But there has to be some responsibility of leadership here. What I'm saying is the fact that this became a national issue with Bernie Sanders when he ran for president. This was a national issue. People were talking about it. It wasn't just some kind of conversation that that was just being discussed. This was actually on the national agenda on a major national campaign. So I mean, now that that's over, I mean, what's the point of what's the point of bringing something to the national consciousness? And then when you're in a position to be able to do something, then you don't do anything. I think the thing of it is that what you were saying, Jackie, and this is my opinion, is that it's not about vilifying Bernie Sanders. It's not about none of those things. What it's saying is that there's some responsibility here. You're in the Senate. And not only are you in the Senate, you probably have the most name recognition in the Senate, in Congress right now, because you just ran for president. Especially with progressives and with and those who are still beholden to the Democratic Party.
Right.
Bernie has basically skated since the campaign's been over. Now, maybe some of you don't like me saying this, but no, but I'm saying, listen to what I'm saying. When it was presented to him to be the leader of, is Bernie going to do this? Then Bernie said no. His thing was more for party unity. His thing was more for making sure that the party was unified. He even got a position do that. But at the same time, he still opened up that Pandora's box of issues that he claimed that he stands by. So I mean, what's taking so long of at least lending your reputation and your name to something like this?
Right.
That's all I'm saying.
Right. And I think my perspective is
exactly, Brother Baraka. He just said what I was meant to say. He said that he has the leading progressive. As leading progressive, he has a responsibility to push the envelope, and I totally agree with that.
Right. And see that this is the thing. If you are going to campaign on pushing for single payer or any, and I mean, look, okay, I just sat online for the past year, basically, and watched some very passionate people who want progressive policies sit on their hands, literally sit. I mean, well, not literally. Okay, maybe not literally, but sit on their hands wondering, what is Bernie going to do? You know, every move they make is hinged on what is Bernie going to do. And then when Bernie does something they don't like, when Bernie is working within the Democratic Party, then Bernie Sanders is a sheepdog. Then Bernie Sanders is a traitor. Then Bernie Sanders is this, that, and the third. Then you've got people who are very supportive of Bernie Sanders and who are saying, no, look, he's playing chess with these people. I don't come down on either one of those arguments. I'm just saying, don't let him off the hook when he's being a typical politician like every other politician that gets on our nerves, who campaigns on one thing and then when he's off the campaign trail does something else.
Well, someone mentioned about one of the comments, I don't remember who right now, but someone mentioned that, well, you know, he has reasons for doing, there's, you know, different reasons for doing the things that he does, and we don't know those reasons. Well, that's the thing. I mean, the last I checked, this is supposed to be a democracy. I mean, and last I checked, they're supposed to work for us. So whatever reasons that he could have, those reasons should, you know, we should be privy to that. You know what I mean? Not only as constituents and as citizens, but we should, you know, but even as a progressive strategy, what are you holding back for? What are your reasons? You know, if your reasons is about, you know, doing this for the people, then why does it have to be so secretive? What I'm saying is, Jackie, I agree with your point, is that this is what happens when we make anything about one person.
Right.
And even when Bernie Sanders was running for president, the first thing that many of us said is that whether he win or lose, this is not about Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders lose to Hillary or whatever happens, we still have to go on with this agenda. Now, so many people have made it about Bernie Sanders. Not you or I, but so many people have made it about Bernie Sanders to the point now, like you said, it's like, well, you know, what would Bernie do? And, you know, and we're waiting for Bernie to act and all this stuff. Yes, I believe that Bernie has a responsibility in these things, but I also believe that as a progressive movement as a whole, it doesn't hinge on whether Bernie does this or does that.
Yeah, and for some of us, like I said, for the most vulnerable of us, for the most vulnerable among us, our people can't wait until Bernie Sanders decides to do whatever it is he's going to do with single payer or, you know, with Medicare for all. I just feel like if John Conyers could introduce his piece of legislation and just get it over with and get it done with, and I get that there are reasons. I get that, okay, fine, that's all wonderful and dandy. But people's lives are at stake. We're not in a situation here in this country where we can really afford to sit around and wait to see what our favorite politician is going to do. And I have a problem with people who have that response to Bernie Sanders just because it's Bernie Sanders. But when other politicians campaign on issues and then don't follow through on those issues, see.
Barack Obama, Elizabeth Warren.
You see, I just want us to hold all of the politicians to the same standard. We have to do that. As much as I am very proud and very excited and wish we could move to Jackson, Mississippi. I thought I'd never say that in my whole life. Look, look, he over there looking like what? We ain't moving to Jackson nowhere, Mississippi.
About that.
As excited as I am about Chokwe Lumumba's win in Jackson, Mississippi, if I were a resident of Jackson, Mississippi, trust and believe, a month after the inauguration parties, I'd be like, so when are you going to move on this? When you said that you were going to do this in the campaign trail, we are lining up an interview with a young man who is the Ward 8 City Council member. We campaigned for him a little bit here, Trayon White. We hope to have him on the show in the coming weeks, and we're sending him emails. Hey, you introduced a bill that will eliminate the doubling of fines for traffic camera tickets. Where is that on that bill? What's going on with that? We have to hold our elected officials to the same standard. They work for us. And if there are reasons they're not doing things, then okay, that's fine. But we deserve to know what those reasons are, because the legislation they pass or don't pass affect our lives.
But I also want to get back to the healthcare thing, and why once again the Democrats are losing ground. Once again, there's an opportunity that the Democrats are going to blow. According to the Suffolk University poll, only 12% of Americans are in favor of this new healthcare bill.
Wow.
Only 12%. I mean, if now is the time. I mean, the window for convincing the American people, because I don't care if people voted for Trump. One of the things that Trump did that is very helpful to the progressive cause, the true him showed up early.
The true him was always there.
The true him showed up early, and the people that voted for him, the love affair, the honeymoon period with Trump had soured real early when he took office. So you got those people. Do you think the 12% that don't agree with the Republican health care bill are just progressives, or those who call themselves Democrats? They said 12% of Americans. That means people that voted for him too. Mm-hmm. Because those are the people in all of those red areas that he claimed he represent, are the ones that's going to their McDonald's jobs and Walmart and everything else to try to make a living, and they're the ones that's seeing that they're being screwed by this too.
Right.
So so once again, the Democrats got the ball, and yet they're going to fumble once again, because what is and this is the point of Washington living inside this bubble. Because had you had the pulse of the nation, you would understand that only 12% of the people, you had more people supporting Obamacare.
Yeah.
Than you have who's supporting the Senate bill. So now it's like the Republicans now, this is how what they're saying. The Republicans are saying now that, okay, only 12% of the people agree with this health care bill. So guess what? We're going to just tweak Obamacare. This is what Mitch McConnell was saying.
Yep.
This is what they're saying, but the Democrats have this problem. They've always had this problem for years now, where they have the ball in their hand, and they refuse to run the ball, and they fumble. Mm-hmm. And when you got 12% of the population right now that's disgusted with what's going on as far as healthcare goes.
Well, 80, what is it, 82%? 88%.
12%.
12% like the bill.
Right, that's right. Thank you. So anyway, when you have that many people who are fed up with what's going on as far as healthcare going in this country, now is the time to say, to push this. Now it's time to push the idea of Medicare for all. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't see what is the big holdup, but the big holdup actually is because, I mean, no matter what the people call themselves, we're still beholden to the big pharma.
Yep.
We're still beholden to all the special interests and everything. And I don't know about our beloved Bernie and everybody else, but there's no excuse for, at this point in time in the Trump administration, why this stuff is not being pushed forward.
Yeah, and especially, again, when we're talking about the most vulnerable among us, the people who were still left out of insurance coverage were many poor black people and poor white people, but a lot of poor black people in states that were run by Republican governors that did not expand Medicaid because they hated the black guy in the White House that much. And the Democrats knew they had a majority in Congress for 2 years. But it was the Democrats who would not vote for Medicare. So listen,
Right.
If you really want to reform the Democratic Party, pick up the damn ball and slam dunk that thing. I mean, even the idea, and we're going to have to move on to another topic, but the idea that people believe that, look, well, you know, there's a reason that Bernie isn't doing this now, and the reason he's not introducing this legislation, I saw somebody say this, the reason he's not introducing this legislation is because he knows it's not going to pass. Sometimes a symbolic gesture goes a long way in politics. Optics are important. Playing using your political capital is important. Timing is important. And sometimes when you're playing to win, if you play the hand, even if you lose, you win a lot sooner than you think you will. People need to see somebody in the Democratic Party stand up on our behalf. They're not doing it.
That takes leadership, and we're all the leaders.
Thank you. That's
the thing.
That's all we're saying. Not saying that Sanders isn't working on a Senate. We're just saying that, dude, it's taking a long time. It's taking way too long, and it's time we don't have. So, all right, hon. What's the next topic that you have?
All right. Well, there's another one that I got here where we've been talking about this for a long time. Not for a long time, but we've been speaking about, and the title of the show is why we can't stop. Why it's not in our best interest to not talk about race. And you got to forgive me, y'all, because I just ate a big meal. I'm sitting over here fighting the itis.
Oh, wait. I'm sorry. There he is.
No, so if I come off a little discombobulated, I mean...
The big meal is your fault because you cooked it. You cooked it.
So, so I got the itis on the side of me talking about, what's up, dog? I know you got to do this show, man, and all, man, but it would be nice to hit that sack, right? Yeah, so that's what's happening. But one of the reasons why, now when you go on our page, we put a very, and bear with me now, but we put this video that was released by, Minneapolis police, that showed the additional footage of the Philando Castile incident. Very heartbreaking. If some of you haven't seen it, it's a very heartbreaking piece of film. And once again, the cast of trolls come out, the racists and everything like that. And sure, it's easy to say dismiss these people, but I don't know what positions these people have in their real lives. I know what they say on social media, but I don't know if this person is teaching my child.
Come on now.
I don't know if this person is who's saying these hateful things is the principal of a school that my kid goes to, or maybe a police chief somewhere,
or a school that your kid goes to,
right? Or your kid go to, or maybe it could be just a cop on the beat. I don't know who these people are. So we say, well, look, they're just stupid. We should just ignore it. But I want to set this up because those of us who remember that when that film first came out, when the videotape first came out, the narrative that was being put out there was the little girl in the back, silent, watching the person who she sees as her father figure, because now that was a big issue too. Oh, he really wasn't her father. Well, he was the man that was helping taking care of her mother. That makes him a father to me. And so when he was killed, trying to comply with this maniac police officer, because when I seen the videotape, the cop looked like he was out of control, not Philando Castile. So what happened is the narrative was, oh, look how strong they are. Look how strong they are. And I'm sorry, people, this has roots back in history when, black people were able to feel more pain than everybody else.
That was the lie.
Right. Well, it was a lie. We were able, you could traumatize us, but somehow we just bounced back. Stupid, though, we were, as we would claim to be stupid, but at the same time, we had this high tolerance for mistreatment and for pain and all this stuff. And so when the video came out, it was the same thing. Oh man, that little girl, she was strong, and 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 the fiance who was basically narrating this thing on live stream. Oh, she was, look how strong she is, and this and that and the other.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that
Sorry.
feedback is messing with me.
Sorry.
So what happening is the fact that now they had this additional footage that come out, and we see what they left out. How this little girl now, you see the trauma that this little girl is acting out.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You see the fear, you see the trauma, you see the terror that they're going through. And not that the terror just didn't end there in the police car that they sat in for an hour, while the cops got their lives together, because that's all that was.
Mm-hmm.
Then they take them down to the police station, and they proceed in such a callous mood. Philando's dead.
Right. He just died. He
I'm
just
sorry
died.
to
We're
tell
so
you.
sorry that happened.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, but he just died. So anyway, what can you tell us? I mean, where does these people come from? What type of soul do these people have?
Right.
And so this is the
Right.
thing that I'm saying, like, it's already been determined that this guy got shot because he had a wide nose. Because
Right.
that's what the cops pulled him over for.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
He got shot because he had a wide nose. So then now he's trying to comply, because ain't that what y'all tell us to do? He's trying to comply. He's in the open carry state. He goes around and he's respecting the officer. Even his fiance, after this cop killed her fiance, after the cop killed Philando, she's still serving him to death.
Right.
You
Right.
know, you just killed my fiance, sir. You just did this, sir. You want to know how racism is such a very toxic thing? Because we've been told so much that this is how you have to behave, that even when we're the victims of terror, it's still, I must behave in a certain way.
Right.
You know what I mean? I still got to behave in a certain way, even though there was no reason for my fiance to be murdered right now.
Right.
But I have to still serve you because you're so insecure, that you're so insecure with your title that I have to, I have to constantly not make you feel that you're threatened.
Right.
This
Right.
is what we're told. So what I'm saying is the fact that the reason why we cannot stop talking about race, because this is just one videotape. And so the reason why we can't stop talking about this, because this is an institution that got that man murdered.
Mm-hmm.
This is an institution. This is the same institution, as we said on the show last week, that this man was paying taxes to. He was employed, so he's paying taxes for this. So the guy who killed him was receiving his salary from Philando Castile.
Right.
As a taxpayer.
Right.
So when we talk about race and everything like that, we're talking about it because we've been the victims of it for over 500 years.
Right. Exactly.
So who else is going to talk about it? Who else is going, and we've tried that before too, aligning our interests, our agenda with everybody else, only to have us be told that it's not the time, while everybody else walk away with the cheese.
Right. Right.
We sitting there.
And we got crumbs.
Yeah, we walk away with the cheese, and we seen that under Obama. Once again, he's not the president of just black people. Well, no, he's not. But we went too far with it. We went too far. Yes, he wasn't the president of just black people. He was the American president. But we went so far as saying, not only is he not the president of black people, we ain't even going to ask him for nothing.
Yep.
Because we just glad he dead.
and our response, and that response cost us losing more economic ground than we've lost.
They ran away again.
Did they run away again? Did you run the?
Yeah, they done ran away again.
Did you run the nice white people off again?
They ran away again. Here he come again. But you know what? But this is the reason why we got to talk about it.
See, and thank you. The reason we have to keep talking about race is because some of y'all don't want to talk about race, and the reason we are still dealing with issues that revolve around racism is because some of y'all don't want to talk about race. That it all goes back to you. It really does all go back to some of you all. And this is why I'm starting this series on Brick by Brick this week, Thursday night at 9 o'clock. Please understand, it's not going to be a one-on-one primer on, a 101, a racism one-on-one primer. I'm not going to give you the history of racism because you know what it is. I'm sick and tired of, I have just spent the past 2 weeks having a whole bunch of white people tell me that somebody who did something intentional, and intentionally accuse someone they knew wasn't a racist of being a racist, didn't understand racism. Get the I just spent 2 weeks listening to otherwise rational people who, at least who I thought were rational, actually try to tell me that that was true. And I realized that no, you all don't need to understand what racism is. You understand what racism is perfectly well, because when it suits some of you, you will use it to get what you want, which is exactly what was done. Although the person who did this, she got more than she bargained for, both of them, because usually we don't push back like we have. But it's a new day. Listen here. So,
but see the problem with this too, and let's call it what it is. The problem with us, if we were to decide that okay, as you know, as a big kumbaya agreement, we're not going to talk about issues that affect African Americans. We're not going to talk about that. Even though on this show we know it's all connected. It's not just about African Americans, mm-hmm. but it's about the global diaspora. Mm-hmm. That's what we talk about. But just say, for example, we were going to do that. Then all of a sudden now it lends a false sense of hope, a false sense of security to say that for our white brothers and sisters say, well, see, things must be getting better because they're not that angry anymore.
Exactly.
It goes back to what we saw in I'm Not Your Negro, the James Baldwin documentary piece, mm-hmm. when Bobby Kennedy stated how if we just behaved ourselves, and one day we'll have a Negro president.
In 40 years.
Well, yeah, I mean, in 40 years we'll have a Negro president, even though his family just came over here from Ireland. We had black families that's been here for generations before the Kennedys got here. But yet he's telling us and telling our people that if you just behave yourself and if we feel, comfortable enough with you, then you'll have a Negro president. That's what we got in Barack Obama, was a Negro president. That's exactly what we got.
That's
was a Negro president.
Precisely what we got.
But what that does is that would lend a false sense of everything is okay. Mm-hmm. That's why we cannot stop talking about it. We got into this position that we are now with our failing schools and everything like that because we have been shamed into not standing up for our issues.
Right.
And we've sat back and let white liberals say, oh, just elect me. And not just white liberals, the black bougie middle class mm-hmm. that got elected, mm-hmm. the stepkids of the civil rights movement, mm-hmm. they got in there. And once again, we spoke about that on the show too. So when they got there and left the masses behind, all of a sudden now, they kept assuring us.
Right.
Once we get in there, we're gonna, we got your back. Once we get in there, and what happened? Black people in mass come out to the polls. Mm-hmm. They do all this. Mm-hmm. Get those folks up in there, and then here it is, decades later, we're still with the same crappy schools, still with the same crappy jobs. Unemployment. You name it. We're still dealing with that. So when we did those things and tried to say that we're all in this together, well, what happened is that we got left behind.
Right.
So we have to advocate for ourselves, and this is not to exclude anyone else. But it's mighty funny that we have to always keep saying that. It's mighty funny that we always have to keep making that disclosure that, just because we want to do this doesn't mean. I ain't never seen a Latino person come to me when they were talking about the Dreamers and they were talking about anything. They ain't never come to me and say, well, Ab, I am for immigration reform. I am for, a pathway to citizenship. This is not to say that I don't support black issues. I never had LGBTQ people come to me and say, yes, I'm for marriage, equality in marriage. Yes, I'm for this. Yes, I'm for that. But that doesn't mean that I don't understand and I don't support your issues. They did not feel that they had to explain that to me. But because of the climate, the way we've been, the way that we're being conditioned to respond politically, it's to the point now that we always have to make that disclaimer.
Right. Right. And the thing is, we know that we have to keep talking about racism because when we look at the responses from well-meaning white people who are all Black Lives Matter and who say they want to change this white supremacist system, these are the people who say things like, how can this still happen? What do you mean, how can this still happen? We've never addressed the problem of racism in this country because you don't want to talk about it, because it makes you uncomfortable. Well, see, you talking about racism makes you uncomfortable. Us having to live under it takes our lives. Philando Castile is just the latest unfortunate that he's just another martyr for the damn cause that shouldn't have happened. But seriously, it's insane that even the people who mean well say the crazy things they do about black victimization at the hands of the state as a result of systemic racism. Things like what you were talking about, Ab, about that 4-year-old child. And
Right.
and no, we're not going to play the video because
Well, it's
I
on the
mean,
page, you
there's
know,
it's on the page, but I mean we're not going to play it live because that's just too much. And that child will need therapy. She and her mother will need help for the rest of their lives. We wish them healing because they desperately need it, but we wish them justice too. But see, we cannot get justice for them if we don't enter into an honest conversation about why the murder of Philando Castile was racist in the first place. And we're not going to be able to have that conversation if y'all are uncomfortable talking about race. We're not going to be able to have that conversation if some of y'all are uncomfortable talking about the very problematic and troubling things that some of your white heroes and heroines do in regard to race. We're not going to have that conversation if y'all keep telling us, well, you know, maybe we would be open to talking about it if you would just, you know, change your tone a little bit. We're dying over here. I don't have time to placate your feelings. We don't have time to placate your feelings about you not liking the way I am telling you about how we need to work to stop us from being slaughtered.
Well, I mean, half the time they talk about tone, but half the time we can't even be seen. You know, I mean, half the time, I mean, and that was one of the things that the Native American sister said to the white female reporter.
That's a great one.
Yeah, I mean, we have a hard time being even seen. You know, I mean, we had to deal with the I don't see color. You know, we have to deal with, color means nothing to me. And, thank God for people like Dr. Joy DeGroy and all those who explain how you saying that you don't see color is not a compliment to me. You know what I mean? I kind of like the way God made me. As well, you should like the way God made you. So, I mean...
I like the
Michelle,
way God made him, too.
Yeah, so Michelle made a good point, though. She said, it's better late than never. She said, a lot of white people are getting it. And look, I am glad of that. I am glad of that because, see, we have to be grown-ups about this. Because, I mean, if y'all been following Jackie and I for a while, we get in black people's behinds, too.
All the time.
Mean, we digging their asses for real. I mean, we know. And we do that. We're, but at the same time, all of this is done out of love. And it's the same way because we want to see a better world. We want to see our society move forward. We don't want to just constantly see people revert to their camps and anchor themselves in these camps.
Right.
Progressive means what? What does progressive mean? Progressive means to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to move forward. We're trying to move the conversation forward, the dialogue forward. So eventually, hopefully, God willing, that the ones that come after us will have a little less fighting to do, in order to make it in this country.
Right. I'm so glad that you mentioned the indigenous sisters who spoke out at the press conference, because that video we do have. And for those of you who we do have that. For those of you who do not know what we're talking about, here is that clip right.
Most Canadians think that Justin Trudeau is making an effort. I gather you don't feel what he's doing is worthwhile.
Well, have you seen how much teenagers are going missing in Thunder Bay? There's white supremacy, obviously. That's what's going on. That young boy. Yeah.
Uh-oh, can't hear it.
How can he be blamed for that? I mean, you don't think that anything he's doing is helping the situation? Is he an improvement over Stephen Harper? I mean, what talk about the record, is it?
Excuse me, did I just hear you correctly? How can he be blamed for that?
No.
Excuse me.
Excuse me.
Don't speak to us that way.
Stop right now. You do not speak to us that way. We are human beings, and the way that you're speaking to us
is not acceptable. No, stop it. Stop it right now.
We don't want you here. Can you please leave?
Step out. Step out. Then I don't want to hear from you.
You have no right.
You don't speak to us like that.
Very simple question. Can I have an
Yeah.
answer?
And this is the problem, the way you communicate.
I'm not
You're in-
insinuating
No.
anything. I'm looking for information.
I'm not gonna argue with you.
I'm not
gonna
arguing
stop.
No, stop. Stop. You need to stop.
I'm only
You
asking
need to
you-
stop. Stop. You're a guest.
So, if you are not familiar with the context of that video, Canada now is about to celebrate Canada Day, which is the 150th anniversary of the establishment of Canada. And like I said earlier, in response to somebody posting the video clip from Canadian News about the protests that Indigenous people are staging in Canada, in protest of Canada Day, because I mean, the founding of every nation is based on the pain and the bones of somebody. I mean, so you have to ask yourself, whose story isn't being told in these celebrations of these? Audio is not on. I'm sorry. So I'm just talking and there's no audio. I realized that the audio wasn't on. So that video is from Canada, and it is in response to the Indigenous protests that are going on in protest of Canada Day. Canada is celebrating its 150th anniversary of the founding of Canada. And like I said in response to somebody's post, look, every nation, the founding of every nation is based off of somebody's pain and somebody's bones. Right? So you have to ask yourself, when these nations are celebrating, when some of these nations are celebrating their existence, their founding, you have to ask yourself whose story isn't being told in their celebration. And in this case, it's the Indigenous people of Canada. So these ladies there was a press conference about the ongoing struggle that Indigenous people in Canada are having in regard to justice and recognition by the Canadian government. And everybody is in love with Justin Trudeau. Oh, he's everybody's favorite liberal white guy right now. And the Native people in Canada are like, yeah, he ain't special, because our people are still disappearing and nobody cares. Still, our rights are still being violated. We can't even be heard. So they're talking about their issues, why they're protesting. And this reporter asks, well, I mean, isn't Justin Trudeau doing something? I mean, isn't that enough? And the young lady says, listen, if he's doing so much, why are these things still happening to us? And the reporter just completely dismisses that young woman's criticism of Justin Trudeau not doing enough in their regard. And that's why those women were angry, and they had every right to be, because for the past 2 weeks, that's exactly what we saw. And this is the experience we have in this country. This is the experience Black people have too, when we criticize our elected officials in regard to what they don't do in regard to our issues. You know, we get these responses like, well, look, wasn't the Civil Rights Act passed? Well, the Civil Rights Act was passed, but it didn't go far enough, obviously.
But you got affirmative action.
Well, you got affirmative action. Well, affirmative action really didn't help Black people that much.
White women.
It helped white women a lot, though.
Yeah.
Well, you have welfare. Welfare wasn't even created for Black people.
Yep.
You had the first Black president. Well, the first Black president didn't do anything for us. Well, he's not the president for. See, no matter how we criticize the shortcomings of this government that we pay taxes to, no matter how we honestly criticize the shortcomings of our elected officials, when we say, yeah, I like Bernie Sanders and I support him and everything, but if he doesn't talk about reparations, we're going to have a problem. Well, look, he's going to deal with income inequality, and a rising tide lifts all boats. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. So if we continue to get that kind of, yeah, I see what you're saying, but it really doesn't matter in the sphere of what's important to me, yeah, we're gonna keep having these problems. So when we have these discussions and we try very hard to be respectful. I really hate that term because I honestly couldn't care whether you feel like I'm respectful when I tell the truth or not. The truth is the truth. Whether you accept it or not, that's your problem. But if every time we have these conversations, we don't get actual engagement in the conversation, all we get is criticism of our criticism, we're going to stay on this hamster wheel. And we're going to have more and more Philando Castiles. How many people were killed by, unarmed people were killed by the police last week? Just last week. There were 2 in the past 2 days. 2 different states. But y'all want to keep talking about our tone. Y'all want to keep talking about aggressive body language. And the people we have been trying to tell you are absolutely our enemies, the enemies of the people of the state. Now they're coming after you. So let's end on this one last thing. What's this Urban Shield thing?
Okay, I didn't even know we was gonna get to that.
Me either.
Because you have it, don't you?
Okay, yeah, I do have it. So this is why. This is one of the reasons why. Another reason why we cannot stop talking about race in America. Why it is important. Because these kinds of things don't happen in the suburbs. Let me see if I can make that a little bit bigger for you so you can see. Urban Shield is basically the U.S. government getting together with some city councils and mayors and allowing them to stage war games, to train for urban warfare in urban areas. Who lives in urban areas? In most cities, mostly poor Black and Latino people. So you have the military that is training soldiers for urban warfare in American cities like Berkeley, California. And these military units are also sharing their training with police departments. This is the kind of thing Black people are fighting that's going on in our cities. This is what our government is doing to us. And they are taking this so-called training in urban warfare and they are exporting it to African countries where, and we didn't get to that, and we're going to get to it next week. We're definitely going to get to
the whole AFRICOM
the whole U.S. AFRICOM thing and the hundreds of U.S. military bases in Africa right now. That's the kind of thing that our government with our military and our police departments are training to do, to go into countries in Africa and carry out war games. This is the kind of thing Black people are fighting against. You can find this article. Well, I'll provide you links to this article that's on Black Agenda Report for military games, urban shield trainings that are going on in some cities around the country. And Black people are fighting this because we know that it's not only being used to train police departments against us, but it's also being exported to be used against our brothers and sisters on the continent. This is why we can't stop talking about race. Because, see, our government isn't doing this to white people in the suburbs. So I'm going to give you a link to all of our articles that we talked about today. And we're going to continue this conversation, y'all, about not just politics in general, because yes, we have to talk about the policies, we have to talk about politicians, we have to talk about the current events, what's going on, but we cannot afford not to talk about race. We can't afford not to talk about race in regard to healthcare. We can't afford not to talk about race in regard to education, in regard to income inequality, in regard to being anti-war, because Africa is the new frontier now for the Department of Defense.
Well, I mean, it never stopped being the frontier.
Right, it never stopped being the frontier, but now it's just becoming more. They're coming clean about it. They're finally just being honest about it, because they're like, well, we're so entrenched in there. Why lie? Why lie? We can't afford not to talk about race. And again, if we deal with the issues of race in this country, so many other people's issues, so many other issues get addressed. But if you see race and racism, let me rephrase that. If you see racism as unimportant because you believe that race is not a thing, then you will never understand that race was created as a thing to perpetuate racism. That's why race is important. That's why we cannot afford to stop talking about it. So, join us next Saturday at 6 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We will post the links to our articles on our page. Consider supporting us on Patreon. I will have a GoFundMe or something up. Kickstarter. The husband said Kickstarter, so it'll be Kickstarter. I will have that up within the week for those of you who would like to just make a one-time contribution to Luke Mon Nation. We do appreciate your support. We love you all very much. Join us over.
Kickstarter is not for Patreons for Luke Mon Nation. Kickstarter is for the documentary.
Yes, thank you. See, this is why I need him, because I get stuff all confused in my head.
Baltimore After the Fire.
Baltimore After the Fire. We are actively starting to work on our documentary about Baltimore After the Fire. You can see the original videos that we did when we went to Baltimore. The day after the uprising? The couple of days after the uprising?
Well, actually, we went there the day of the verdict.
Oh, that's right. It was the day of the verdict. If you go to our YouTube page on Luke Mon Nation, you can see some of those original videos. And we intend to go back and document how Baltimore has changed, if it hasn't changed, and capture the perspectives of the people who have been affected since then. And we'll be working on that, so we need your support for that. So that is what our Kickstarter campaign will be about. Thank you all for joining us. Did I forget anything else?
Subscribe.
Oh, yes.
Get your notifications.
At the end of the video, make sure you click notifications to get your live notification for when we go live. Share this video. Like our Facebook page, Coffee, Current Events, and Politics, and Brick by Brick. With me on Thursday nights at 9 p.m. He's going to start singing now. Now I know it's time for us to go. Thank you all so much. Subscribe to us on YouTube too, Luke Mon Nation. We'll see you all next week. Thank you. Peace.